All right, well, thanks so much for the kind introductions, and welcome to my fellow panelists. I'm Scott Onder. So excited to be here today. Good morning, welcome. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for Mercy Corps and also the co-founder of Mercy Corps Ventures. So as the venture capital fund for a global development agency, we leverage an extensive global network across more than 40 countries. And for the last decade have been really at the forefront of investing in climate resilience technologies here in Africa. Really enjoyed James's talk. Thank you, James, for that great discussion. I feel like so many of the themes in that conversation that we just had are ones that we want to accentuate in the conversation today. We're going to be inviting three really amazing entrepreneurs onto the stage here to tell their stories around their climate journeys, as well as hearing a bit from the investor perspective. So looking forward to getting started and kicking that off. So as I mentioned, Mercy Corps Ventures has been investing in climate resilience tech for the last decade. And in fact, this is our 10th anniversary year, and we're going to be kicking off the celebration here at ATS. And really excited to share a lot of the learnings that we've formed over the last decade, as well as our thoughts on what the future holds for tech and climate in Africa for the decade to come. So we actually do have some slides. I wanted to see if those could be projected up now. Thank you. And if you could just advance it to the next slide, please. So since we started investing in 2015, we've invested in and supported 56 seed and early stage ventures to scale and raise over 500 million in capital. And these startups have directly impacted over 37 million people across more than 80 countries. A huge thanks to all these entrepreneurs that have actually made this happen, right? So it's the founding entrepreneurs, it's their teams, but it's also the partners and our fellow investors that have been on this journey with us so far. So in addition to capital, and if you could advance the slide deck, please. In addition to capital, support is absolutely crucial. So we've launched 22 pilots with startups to help build the evidence base for the impact of their cutting edge solutions. And we've successfully supported 81% of those companies to raise follow-on rounds of investment. And if you look at in the US, where less than 50% of startups are able to raise that follow-on round of financing, it speaks to how important additional support, piloting, testing, building capacity is to make the difference. So, the growth of climate tech in Africa has been remarkable. Just last year alone, through only September, climate tech startups had raised $415 million. And that made up a third of all the startup capital that was raised on the continent last year. And it also put climate tech ahead of all other sectors in terms of how attractive to investors it is. So it really has been a remarkable story over the last decade of really starting small and growing to be a very prominent part of our tech ecosystem here in Africa. And that's great because we know that climate tech can really create or has the potential to create a more resilient and sustainable future. So let me give a few examples. If you could advance the slides, please. So regenerative agriculture, climate fintech, climate smart technologies, these are all deeply interrelated and interdependent, right? So we need to scale all three if we're gonna make the progress we want toward climate action. And as a thesis-driven investor, we invest across all of these themes, right? And so we invest in innovations in regenerative agriculture, things like precision ag, tech-enabled agriculture that help strengthen the resilience of farmers and the food systems that they operate in. So today we're going to hear from startups like Agrails, like Aquarech, that are leveraging AI-driven insights to optimize farming practices and to build that next generation food system that's more resilient. So climate fintech, solutions like digital savings, embedded credit, trade finance, and insurtech that enable households, businesses, industries to better manage and transfer climate-related risks. We're going to get into that as well. A wave of climate-focused fintechs like Pula, like others like Epoch, they're creating new pathways for people to prepare, to adapt, and to recover from climate shocks and stresses, right? And lastly, we look at investing in climate-smart technology, so climate analytics and AI, from tropical weather forecasting models like Ignitia to flood data analytics platforms like Floodbase. We invest in traceability and sustainable supply chain solutions, renewable energy for productive use. We're very interested in nature-based solutions and a range of startups that are catalyzing resilience in supply chains, in communities, in energy systems, in regional biospheres. So over the coming decade, we expect to see an accelerating advancement in all of these areas. And to make this real today, so we wanted to have founders actually speak to these models. And so the founders and leaders of 3 companies are up on stage here to tell their story. So with that, allow me to introduce our first speaker. I want to welcome Rose with Pula. So I'm going to come sit down with you so I'm not awkwardly standing here. Cool. All right, so welcome Rose. I want to introduce Rose, who's the founder of Pula, to hear about her journey revolutionizing crop insurance for farmers in Africa and beyond. And Rose's story, for us, really exemplifies how local innovation can have a global impact. So, again, welcome Rose. So good to have you here with us today. Can you just maybe start by please telling us about Pula?
Sure. So nice to meet all of you, and thanks for coming. I can hear it's super loud here. Am I audible enough, or do I need to speak up a bit? I'm good? Okay, good. I started Pula 10 years ago, 2015, and I always say, and this is only half joking, that if I have to explain what I do as Pula and I'm at a party and I am tired, it's been a long day, and I want to get rid of people and I actually just want to go home, I tell them that I sell insurance, which is the surest way of getting rid of whoever you're talking to. Like literally, like, you know, I could be, yeah, it doesn't matter how you look, you know, you tell them that you sell insurance, it's like, it's gone. If I am at that same party and I would like to, you know, I'm feeling about it, or you know, you really want to tell what you're doing, I think Pula over the last 10 years has developed a pretty unique proposition to develop and sell crop insurance, livestock insurance for smallholder farmers across Africa and Asia. We're in about 18 African markets, 2 Asian markets. I always think the numbers are a bit baffling. I grew up in Tanzania, and my mom for 25 years ran a women's group that served 25 women. And I always kind of, you know, when I started a business, I said this thing that I really wanted to hit scale. We serve about 5 million farmers a year, but I'm kind of coming back to what my mom used to say, you know, you have to treat those first 25 like the other 5 million, right? It's so important. It's not about the numbers in the end. It's just about how each individual farmer, or for us in our case, as a business, we learned pretty early on that we couldn't sell insurance directly. As I said, if you tell people that you sell insurance and everybody loses interest immediately, whether it's a party or whether you're selling insurance, the same holds here, right? So we learned pretty early on as a business that we had to sell insurance through organized groups, whether they were banks, cooperatives, agri-fintechs, governments, agribusinesses. You effectively had to work with organizations that were selling products that farmers actually wanted. We are mid-February. In a month or so, it'll be mid-March in Kenya. I always say, you know, mid-March, 15th of March is a magic day for farmers. It means that the rains are about to start. Then they want things like fertilizer and seeds. They still don't want insurance. But if you package insurance together with fertilizer and seeds, with loans, with government programs, then you will get scale. And that is basically how we built the company.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I love that point that you just made about, even though you're serving tens of millions of farmers at this point, focusing on that one farmer and making sure you're treating them well is as crucial to the whole model. And, you know, looking back at the last decade, I'd love just to hear about your journey. Like, where you started Rose. What was your vision originally to set out? And then I'm sure there's been challenges along the way. How did you surmount those challenges?
So I am very much not a vision person. Maybe this is the woman inside of me, or I'm very much, between me and my co-founder, he's the big vision. We want to reach 100 million farmers by 2030. We want to create a $100 million company. I'm always kind of the one between the two of us that thinks, what are we doing today, the next 2 to 3 months, where do we get our execution right? And this also kind of, for me, reflects this kind of, whether it's 25 or 5 million farmers that you're serving, how do you really get shit done, right, on the ground? And I think, if we think about how we started, any business that has survived to live, 10 years, I think any founder, like all of us here on stage at a conference like this, when I walk in, we're all selling success, right? But any business that has survived for 10 years has certainly also nearly died a couple of times. And any founder that tells you that's not true, to me, that's a scam artist. It's just, there is no reality there. I would say, I was just thinking about this question before we came on stage, and you kind of could split it up into years of 4 to 5 years stages for us. And given it as agriculture, you need a bit longer because you have different seasons that you're working with. I would say in the beginning, when we started, up to about 2019, we thought that our business was going to be selling seeds, fertilizers, embedded with insurance. And our biggest customers were going to be the Bayers, the Syngentas of the world. I used to work for Syngenta, so I knew their business model well. I remember that in 2019, my co-founder and I found out that the full marketing budget of one of these companies in Africa, and it was a huge multinational, the full marketing budget that was effectively paying for our product was $1 million for the whole of Africa. At that point, you're thinking, okay, so to use venture terms, my total addressable market here in Africa, my revenue potential, if they decide to spend nothing on marketing, but only buy insurance because it's going to be this magic bullet. At that point, we were like, okay, so this, from a pure revenue perspective, this isn't going to work. It was, from a pure, we can't build a $100 million business from here. We actually, at that point, we had another product line, which was, and my investors always tell me to remind people of this, I'm not the finance brain in our company, that we had another product line where we had an 80% gross margin. And it was doing decently well. And, we started to get some traction in it, but with a very unlikely customer base, African governments. Our investors were, I remember I just closed a Series A at that point, and I told my investors that instead of focusing on these really nice, understandable, big international agri-corporates, our biggest customer base was going to be African governments. I think some of them nearly had a heart attack. I think given, gladly all of the money was in the bank. As a founder, don't kind of sell these stories or change your mind until after the money's in the bank. I'm sure investors don't like hearing this, but that's just the reality. It's very hard for them to get the money back. Anyway, I can say these things, I guess. Or at least I try. I feel like you should. Look,
go ahead.
Look, we've worked, I think, if you think about it, in the last couple of years, I think our revenue mix has grown and changed. I think we still, we really, we work very well with African governments. In some markets, for example, Zambia last year, by now we reach about 30% of the population. This means that insurance penetration went from below 1% in the last 10 years to 30% of the population, i.e. 1 in 3 people in Zambia have our insurance product. I think that's pretty damn awesome, right? We also had the largest insurance payout in Zambia in Africa historically, $40 million going out to farmers. I think that's also pretty damn amazing. But I'm also excited to see that, now we're also getting more traction based on the data that we've collected and our insurance really relies on field and ground truth data, that's getting traction from other kind of the agribusinesses again, the commodity traders in the big kind of spaces, particularly with regards to things like EUDR, so big compliance kind of rules coming up. So yeah, I think it's, I think 10 years means that you've probably killed your business a couple of times, but you've also survived to see another day. There you
Incredible.
go, that's the journey.
And I think that's such an amazing kind of insightful journey to share with the group here, because as you're describing those near-death experiences, so to speak, or your tremendous ability to raise capital. I mean, Pula's been remarkably successful at that. That's obviously critical for any early stage startup to be able to raise capital. But what are the additional services? Like, what are things that partners can do, that investors can do beyond just capital, that can help support the growth of a company like Pula to help you all succeed?
So I really think that investors beyond the money, and I think every investor that I've ever talked to has always promised me the world beyond just the cash, right? I think the key thing is that, and what they always, they can promise you so many things, but what they really can deliver on, I think, is to be an angel or an advocate for you. Angel not in the investment angel perspective, but really kind of the angel that, when you're talking to a new client and that client has a friend that talks to one of your investors, and your investor says, well, we invest in Pula because, it's kind of this third-party validation, which I think is incredibly important. It's also like, I think your investors really, are a way to leverage and grow your network. Mercy Corps, and I am not paid to say this, but Mercy Corps very early on introduced us to Bayer about 7 years ago. And about 3 weeks ago and now I'm really name dropping, which I hate, so you can shoot me later. 3 weeks ago in Davos, we launched a partnership with Bayer for a 10 million grant that would reach and provide insurance for 10 million farmers across Africa. If Mercy Corps hadn't given that first introduction, hadn't kind of guided that, it's a 7-year relationship that of course we also built, right? We did our part, and as investees, you have to do your part. But I think investors really can be your angels and advocates, and I think that's something that a good investor should do and can do. Whatever else they promise, that part, I feel you can hold them accountable to.
All right, well, thank you so much, Rose. It's been really insightful to talk with you. It's been such an honor to get to work with you all these years. And we'll let you go now, but you can stay up here with us. I want to now hand it over to my colleague, Toffene, to lead the conversation here. So Toffene is a serial entrepreneur, I think a 3-time entrepreneur, if I'm remembering correctly, who's now turned VC investor. And Toffene is a principal on the ventures team. So welcome to Toffene. And perhaps we could put the slides back up for this part of the conversation. If you could advance it to the next slide, please.
The next slides.
Oh,
Yeah,
one more.
Scott. I'll be really quick because the whole idea is to let our entrepreneurs speak. As Scott was explaining, 10 years ago, I was raising the seed for my first startup. Interestingly, MCV was starting exactly at the same time. 10 years later, about 1,000, if not 1,500 startups screen every single year, 56 investments, a whole highly diverse team from LATAM to Africa. We've just felt like this could be a moment also that we could share a few takeaways from this journey. And some of these lessons that I'm going to share are exactly exemplified by the startup that we invited today on this stage. So, yeah, I'm just going to give 3 points, and I'm going to stop there. I'll probably spend the whole day talking about these things because I'm super passionate about investment and startup. I have been on the other side, and now I'm on this side, and I feel like it gives you really, really a great, interesting perspective. So the first point I wanted to start with is the role of post-investment support. This is exactly what Rose was saying. Every fund will actually tell the story about not providing just capital. I just wanted to give a few examples of how we do this, at least in my particular, let's say, tech. So at the moment where we typically invest in a startup, let's say pre-seed or seed, from a founder perspective, there is this kind of rush to grow fast, especially now they have fresh money. This is really, really an important point I'm raising here for everyone who is raising, like everyone who is a founder. At that particular moment, you have, from a product point of view, from a go-to-market point of view, you have probably 100 different paths. This is the best way to describe it. You are in a swamp. There are 100 paths on your way. And in reality, most of those pathways are deadly. And it's very hard to differentiate what path will lead you to your vision. So this is really a moment where we, as MCV, we step in. We are lucky that we are not directly involved into the ground operation, but we have huge experience in these domains, whether it's agriculture, insurance, financial services, climate smart infrastructure, and so on. I really, really insist on this. Like, most of the success of startup can happen at that particular moment. And this is also where you see startup growing in a certain direction, and a year later coming back to pivot. So what we really, our experience here is that if you take the time with the founder, work with them, work on the product, challenge them, challenge their vision, sometimes slow them down, it actually can provide like huge results at the end of the day. I'm 100% convinced that our portfolio has like 82, 81% success rate. Probably half of that has to do with what we do after the investment, not just the due diligence or the pipeline. So that's the first point. The second point is something I'm also super passionate about. It's about infrastructure startup. I don't have a better way of saying this, but if you remember, 10 years ago, the first startup in Africa were like the likes of Jumia, trying to replicate the amazing success of Amazon in Africa. Great idea. I think the only thing that everyone missed was Amazon runs on huge stack of pre-existing infrastructure. Payment, logistic, mobility, all of which actually didn't exist in Africa back then. And until those are actually built, you can just not run at scale an e-commerce, a marketplace startup. I really, really insist on this. Like, we really believe that startups that are building these lower layers that are sometimes more complicated are the ones who are actually building the ecosystem on which we're going to develop. Some of these startups are building, for example, digital aquaculture, applying, for example, sensors on aquaculture in a way that improve the production. Some of these are producing smart batteries, electric vehicles. I can give you an example. Almost everywhere in Kenya today, you see all of these electric bikes coming in. Once this infrastructure scales, I can't say when, but you will see that it will be much easier to run a mobility startup. And then after that, you'll see that it will be much easier to run an e-commerce startup because all of those layers are now available. Unfortunately, these companies tend to be maybe slightly more difficult to build. Sometimes they require a bit of physical infrastructure. Sometimes they require physical distributions. But when they scale, everything built on top of them also follows. And the impact they have has huge ripple effects on the whole economy. I really insist on this one because I know that most of us tend to kind of invest in higher level software only startup. But I believe in this region, this is where the ecosystem starts still today. And the last point I want to make is something I'm gonna be asking to James and John Mwende is about problem first. Today, you probably will see over the conference, everything is about AI. Everyone will be looking at what are the killer apps of AI. We've seen this over and over and over. Our experience, though, is that this rarely works. What tends to work is starting from a problem first, then scanning, looking at, for example, the problem that has prevented aquaculture to scale, that has prevented, for example, insurance or credit rating to scale, and seeing if some of the new technologies that we now have, digital payments, Web3, AI, if there are some specific features on those technology that can allow to resolve that. But if you start from the AI and say, what can I do with AI, you might not get anything. We've seen this. Like when I started my career in telcos, 3Gs were being started. Everyone was looking at what are the killer app of 3G. It never happened until Apple came with the iPhone and the App Store. Apple was absolutely not on the telco. They were looking for something else, but when they saw 3G, they knew exactly what it could resolve for them. So again, I don't want to spend too much time, but these were like the three main points I wanted to share with the team today, both funders and founders in the room. And I'm going to turn now to our founders on the session with a few more questions. So the first question is going to be about problem first, and also infrastructure startups, which are both of your case. James is the founder of Aquarech, which is a company that provides digital aquaculture here in Kenya and probably in other countries in the future. James is the CTO and co-founder. Maybe James, if you could just tell us a little bit about Aquarech, and then how you started the company from a problem first, as we are explaining.
Thank you, Toffene. We are in the aquaculture space, and first of all, it's a very traditional sector, even now that we are a key player in it and we're trying to infuse technology. So how our journey began, and my co-founder and the CEO, Dave, was a fish farmer for 3 years prior to us starting Aquarech. And while he was trying to grow his fish farm in Lake Victoria, he experienced some of the problems we're trying to solve today firsthand. And when we approached the farmers, we did not talk about technology. We did not talk about the apps that we're introducing. We didn't talk about any IoT solutions at that time, because we realized that there's a real pain point that the farmers are facing. And if you look at the sector, a lot of farmers went into aquaculture with very little understanding of the space, because there's huge opportunities. So for instance, in Kenya, more than half of the tilapia consumed in Kenya is imported. Yet the country has potential to produce what it needs and even export. So farmers would see that there's a quick money to be made here, only to be disappointed. And eventually, farmers take 16 months to produce a plate-size fish, which they're going to sell at $2 a kilo. That is the first problem that we realized, that if we could help farmers reduce this production period from by a factor that is significant and make them profitable. So that was our first sales pitch, that we could see an interesting operational gap in your farming practice. And if we bring on board technology and other ways to optimize your production, we could reduce this 16 months production cycle to 8 months. And farmers are less trusting, so you have to prove it with at least a group of farmers. So we were lucky enough that we had some farmers who are willing to take a bet on our solution. And imagine this takes 8 months to prove that point. So what are you doing in between? We look at the entire ecosystem. While we are solving the issue of production, we know very well that once a farmer's production goes up, the next thing they're going to ask you is, where's the market? How's the money ending up in my pocket? And farmers can be very unforgiving if you don't put the money in their pocket at the end of the day. However sophisticated your technology is, at the end of the day, they really want to have this money in their pocket. So we started discussing ideas of how to solve the market issue. And it's a very unstructured market, the tilapia value chain in Kenya, where we can exist up to 3 middlemen. And a lot of the time, these people take advantage of farmers who, after harvesting, they don't have the cold storage solution, and they can sell at a very cheap price. So there comes our tech solution. How can we connect the women fish traders who are looking for quality fish with farmers who have produced their fish and have a market, to make that connection really, really possible. And then you add all these layers that exist, something like mobile payments, verification of farmers and their production practices. And eventually, we introduce the farm management app, because we want to be able to guarantee the trader that the fish you're buying from this farmer is of great quality. How do you know quality? First of all, you need to understand what kind of feed was used in this farm. The second is the farm management practices. Can you record the practices over time? From the market point of view, they don't really want to know the details, but they just want to see quality fish that their customers are going to consume. But from a solution provider point of view, we know that we have to bring all this intervention in the process, and then guarantee this quality fish at the end. So that's really how our journey started, and we started building up our solution from ground up.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, this is really a company that does it all from providing IoT sensors. Like fish farming is difficult in the sense that you don't see the fish. So if you can get data about how the fish grows, the fish health, you can basically turn data into so much insight that can basically optimize the production. And I think also you went beyond that to follow the journey of reselling the fish down to these fish delis that you are launching today. I must say that the best fish I ate in Nairobi was in the fish delis. James and I went, I think, a couple of months ago. Yeah. No, can you just also just tell us quickly a little bit about overall how the experience of maybe working with initial investors has been so far? What has worked, what didn't work, very quickly.
Yes, when we launched our seed round, it wasn't an easy process because we are sitting at the intersection of food systems in Africa, which is a big challenge, and also the issue of climate and how we can solve the protein deficit that exists in Africa, but sustainably. And we had to do a lot of investor education. We spoke to more than 100 investors. A number would be interested, but have very little data to compare. What is the comparable Aquarech? What is your exit path? Who is going to buy you as a company as an exit? You know, all that did not exist for us, and they could only compare us to, you know, fish tech companies in Europe that are largely doing salmon, but still, again, that does not really compare to what we're doing. So it took a lot of investor education for us to explain the opportunity, to explain the demand for food in Africa as more African countries become middle income. The next big issue to solve will be the issue of food, which is already a problem. And the issue of protein is even a bigger problem that exists on the continent. So we had to do all that investor education, collect data, and convince our future projection that they really do make sense. So that really took us a lot of time. It took us up to 8 months to close that round. But we were lucky enough to eventually settle and agree with investors who were aligned. And when you're talking about agtech and in the agricultural system, you need investors who are patient, who understand that some of this infrastructure have to be built by someone. So for instance, in the aquaculture space, we realized that a lot of farmers have their production systems were not built for growth. So a farmer has 300 by 300 pond, which he can only stock 1,000 fish. That farmer is never going to make profit. He's not going to scale. As a startup, you need to support this farmer to grow to a level where they can eventually become profitable. The farmers who are on the cage have very small cages, metallic welded. Again, that infrastructure needs to change. And we had to do all that work of find partners that can help us. One of the biggest challenges that we dealt with in the process with selling to investors is the issue of credit. So as much as aquaculture is the fastest growing agricultural value chain in Africa, really, but it has a lot of issues with financing. Today in Kenya, you could walk in a bank and they'll give you a loan to buy a dairy cow. They have a means to underwrite the risk and invest in that dairy business. But if you showed up that you're a fish farmer, nobody's going to talk to you. They don't have that data. How are they going to lend to you in a sector that is completely not understood with the financial systems? And we had to do that work of educating the financial institution and also explaining to our investors that there's a huge opportunity here, and we're still going to be able to do the groundwork and build the infrastructure for us to scale.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, education, and then, yeah, building and patience. Yeah, I'm going now to turn very quickly to John Mwende, who is also the founder of Agrails. Agrails is one of our first AI startup addressing also the ag sector, insurance, credit rating, and more. So John, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Agrails? I really like this story because this is also another example of problem first. Even though he's been in the AI space for quite a long time, almost as an OG, he basically started from a very concrete problem. Can you just tell us a little bit, walk us through that journey, please?
Sure, Toffene. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. So my name is Mwende. I currently serve, let me just hold this. Yeah, so my name is Mwende. I currently serve as a founder and CEO of Agrails, where we are enabling our businesses to assess, respond to, and price climate risks and opportunities. And the way we do that is through large climate transformation or transform models or generative models to be able to sort of open up this segment. Now, the way I started off in this space was, I've spent more than 10 years of my career just thinking very hard about this problem and working across some of the world's most innovative organizations, including Pula, where I work closely with Rose, right? And one thing that consistently came off to me was the fact that we are seeing a lot of companies that are building for what we call the last mile. So basically the next best carbon accounting tool, the next best loan product, the next best insurance product. But we're not seeing a lot of focus in building the infrastructure that powers these technologies at scale, okay? So much so to the point where I spent 2 years of my life where I actually leased out more than 5 hectares of land and spent just trying to understand this problem, both from an ecosystem's point of view all the way down to a farmer's point of view. And it was very, very clear to me that this infrastructure piece is key towards opening up this space in a big way. And just to help highlight how important this problem is, I'm going to use 2 examples, 2 companies, right? So one company that I love, one company is called Blade, right? And Blade is an American startup that has built the middleware that connects banks with financial applications, right? And as a result of Blade being built, right, it has resulted in more than $1 trillion of value in terms of new companies that have been built on top of it, right? And resulted with some of the largest unicorns, the Robin Hoods, the Mint, and what have you. The second example I'm going to use is a company called Palantir, right? And Palantir is a company that has built deep AI to help support and empower organizations with investigative and analysis workflows at scale. I've been very, very successful at that, right? So based on that, what we saw was that there is a need to build this platform that enables not just to connect the farmers to these organizations for them to access credit, insurance, carbon credits, whatever it is, yeah? But there's also a need to also empower these organizations with the investigative aspect to understand really the customer segments, yeah? Understanding who they are until making the solutions for them, right? So that has resulted in us being able to build what we call the open rail system that connects the first mile to all these customers, opening them up, and also giving these companies the ability to really dig in and build tailor-made solutions. And we've had a bit of success. So we just launched last year, and so far we are supporting more than 4.5 million farmers across 6 different markets, and it's just the beginning. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Again, just starting from problem, looking at how AI can solve that. I really like this idea of providing first mile data in agriculture in a way that we all know data is missing in this region, and being able to attack that with the latest technologies. Maybe very, very last question on this is, how has been the journey with funders? What was the experience with initial investors, like anything that you would like to share with the public on what best and what less?
Thank you again for the mic. All right, so I never wanted to become a founder, right? I was very comfortable going into a great organization and supporting them to build the world's best tools, right? For me, I do thrive in a place whereby we are thinking hard about the next problems and solving for that. I think I do thrive in that space, right? And that is why I spent more than 10 years in AI before really AI was a thing in Africa and what have you. But you see, of course, due to circumstances, seeing that there's a very big need to solve for this problem, I found myself getting into, just making the decision to build the company. And there has been a lot of uncertainties, right? Being a techie at heart, right? Hardcore AI engineer, just trying to figure out how to build a business, how to scale a business, how to come up with a sales strategy and what have you was not an easy thing, right? But you see, I got incredible partners with Mercy Corp Ventures. I do, and this is not because they're here, right? But I do genuinely love them, right? Because they are very, very intentional in the way they support their portfolio companies, at least speaking for on my behalf. They've been holding my hand. Every week we are discussing different elements, connecting me to just industry experts. You see, the key thing about Mercy Corp Ventures is that they don't just talk to you about something, them directly. If they know experts in the field, right, they tap into that network and they connect you. And they are very intentional with making sure that you come up with KPIs that help you drive your business forward. So I think that's been a very, very big value add. And I'm really, really hoping that we get to work on this journey for as long as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that we can just wrap up. Maybe Scott, back to you for maybe one last word, and we can wrap up.
All right. Well, thanks, Toffene. Yeah, so to summarize, just wanted to share a few of the insights I gathered here through these conversations today. I think all of these entrepreneurs and companies are solving for very specific problems, right? And to do so, I think we're hearing that they need to solve and build infrastructure and distribution in order to serve the end customer, whether it's crop insurance or nutritious food or farmer intelligence, right? The second insight that I'm hearing for all the investors out there in the crowd is that, yes, capital is important, but that strategic support that you can provide, the networks, the access to resources and opportunities is just as critical. And third, I think all of these models weave innovation, weave digital solutions in order to achieve scale. But at the same time, in-person, non-digital, boots on the ground engagement is absolutely critical to get traction at the last mile and to achieve more of an enduring scale. So really inspiring conversations. I want to thank all of our panelists here. Thank you, Rose. Thank you, James. Thank you, Mwende. Thank you, Toffene. And thank you to Africa Tech Summit for making this happen.
Wonderful. Thank you again. A big round of applause to them. Excellent. Thank you.